Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. This is going to be a short video. I am over 2 days behind on watering my pots. I managed to knock my cool growing shelves out, this lot down here. I managed to do those on Friday. Yesterday I had my Orchid Society, so that knocked yesterday out. And today I need to get on with things. I'd like to try and get... The trouble is my mounts are a day behind. My non-resting mount should have been watered yesterday and they didn't get done. They have to be done today without, you know, that has to be done. If I had to crawl out here on my hands and knees, they're going to get done. They suffer most from being left more than the allocated time, simply because they dry so fast. Even with these lower temperatures, they still dry fast. You know, 2 days, 3 at a push. And that's where I am now, 3. We did get a little bit of sun yesterday. I think it lasted about 3 minutes. Marvellous. I know it's sad, but I'd like to say about time too. I have not had one of the large flowered cattleyas last that long before. I'm sure it's to do with the cooler temperatures because it flowered in the winter. It's probably just that. And yeah, so that spike can come off today. There's no point in leaving it. As soon as flowers start to fade like that, as in my book, get the spike off. Get those triggers in that plant thinking, oh my goodness, I've lost my blooms, I've lost my chance to produce seed, I need some new growths now. There is a trigger mechanism in quite a few orchids that does that. And the presence of the spike can often hold back that process of firing off those new growths. So even if it's not one of those sort of orchids, it's still worth doing. You know, as soon as the flowers start to fade, they serve no purpose anymore. I mean, that doesn't look pretty anymore with all those brown edges, so I'd rather it was gone. And the plant can then go back up where it's supposed to be, up on the highlight shelf, because I brought it down here for display. What else? This flipping Cymbidium's still not open yet, but patience, patience, boy. Yeah, that'll be the day. Oh, the Nellie Isla has opened, and that has got the depth of colour I was hoping for. The trouble is with the Nellie Islas, there are quite a few named variants of this awkward little tyke, because it's not the easiest thing to grow. And there's the normal one, the one that's been around many years, very popular, and a beautiful bloom, don't get me wrong. But a few years back I managed to get an orange version, and I really, really liked that. I'd have really liked it a lot more if the plant had lived. That was one of the Nellie Isla failures in a chain of failures back down the line. But I've finally got one to grow. I've finally got one with a root system and a new growth that's pushed up a spike. And this is a named variety Red Velvet. And what I like about this is the absence of the markings on the lip. It's a consistent deep red with the deep yellow gold centre. So for me, it's another one of those simple blooms, and in its simplicity is its beauty. You know, lots of big loud splashes and blotches and all stuff like that is all very well, but sometimes just a simple form of 2 colours stands out because of the simplicity of the colour. So I'm well pleased. It's not fully open yet, it will flatten out a bit more, and a few more buds to come as well. For a spike that I've produced myself, I'm quite happy with that. Just a quick update on the Orchid Society meeting. We had a meeting totally different to any other one I've ever been to yesterday. Walked in the hall as normal, and all the chairs were done totally differently. They were done in 2 large sort of curved part circles with a big table as close to those chairs as possible, full of plants. I thought, oh, this is going to be a bit different. And what they chose to do was they had a table full of plants that a few people had bought in, and 2 people went over those plants, each in turn, firstly talking about how you would get that plant ready to put in a show. and differentiated between like a local Orchid Society show and a national show. There is a difference. But nonetheless, the principles are the same. So basically looking at how the flowers are based on the plant. Are the leaves clean? Are there any brown tips to their leaves? If there are, trim them off. You know, the plant's got to look as good as you can get it. And they went over, you know, if you are planning to show a plant, you've got to start early. You know, literally, there are certain, it's like this spike here. That is beautiful. That is no good for a show whatsoever, because it's arched, and it's, by definition, the blooms are now a long way from the plant, which is buried up in there somewhere. So that's not ideal for a show. And if I staked that spike up right now, it would look silly. Yeah? All the aspects of the blooms are nicely balanced on that spike. That is a good spike, and I'm well pleased with it. But it's not much good for a show. So that spike on that plant, if I'd planned to show it, needed to be staked early in its life, so that as the buds develop up that vertical stake, you know, tie it initially, make sure you've got a stake long enough for the potential size of the spike. You don't have to change the stake halfway through, that's for sure. And tie it in as you go, and then the buds will form their aspect on that upright spike, and they'll all be, you know, nicely balanced. And they said it's quite important, especially with these type of spikes, for the majority of the blooms to face the judges. Now that's not as easy as it might sound, but it's going to be a lot easier for people who grow in the house, because the buds will turn to face the light. So as long as you don't keep moving the plant around relative to the light, the buds will all face the same way naturally. But it's not so easy to do in a sort of place like I've got, because the light's coming in from three sides and above. So the blooms will balance themselves around a vertical spike and come out in all directions, which isn't bad, but not as good as them all facing the same way, especially with things like Phalaenopsis. So I know a lot of you don't show and probably wouldn't even consider it, but some do. You know, so these points are quite worth noting. And then we got on to the judging, how judging actually takes place. And it's a lot of it is based on how good an example of this plant is this plant. And that comes into collective knowledge in amongst the judges throughout all the shows built up over the years. You know, things like, things like this. You know, I mean, this is a new variety, so the judges wouldn't have had a huge experience of this variety. Nonetheless, they would know Nellie Islas well. And a good Nellie Isla spike would probably have a dozen or more blooms on, so that would not be classed as a good flowering. And it doesn't matter how good the quality of the blooms are and how good the leaves are, it would not have reached its potential. And that's part of the marking. And that's quite a difficult one to achieve. How do you get round that? Well, pick the most obscure orchids that nobody's ever seen before and never heard of. And then they can only judge it based on your plant, because they have no history in their mind of what it could look like. But, you know, that's the sort of things they go along. You know, there's the quality of the leaves, the cleanliness of the leaves. How well grown is that plant? You know, if it's a Cattleya, and you can see the progression from the seedling pseudobulbs through to the, you know, to the pseudobulb that's in flower now, is it a type of Cattleya that by now should have branched and produced 2 or 3 leaves, and it hasn't? Therefore, they would mark that down as not being growing as well as it could. It hasn't reached its potential. Nonetheless, it still gets, I mean, it's something like 50% of the marks is on the plant, yeah? Only 10% is on the presentation. But nonetheless, that could be the difference between your plant and one on another stand of exactly the same variety losing out, because you didn't get that spike nicely set. You know, you didn't clean your leaves off properly. You didn't trim the brown tips off the leaves if you've got them. You didn't get it ready. as well as perhaps the other person did. So, and then 40% is on the blooming, the quality of the blooms, depth of colour, size of the blooms, and number of blooms on the spikes relative to what that plant is capable of doing. In other words, what they've seen before. So yeah, it was a really enjoyable meeting because it was interactive. You know, instead of being talked at, we were being talked to and encouraged to join in. And then the good bit at the end of the meeting was they picked 8 of the plants, or 8 plants. They weren't all from there. One was from another part of the display. And they put 8 plants on a table and everybody got a form. And on that form you had first, second, third and fourth. And you had to choose, given the information you just listened to, which of those 8 plants were the top 4 and in what order. And then all those forms were handed back in with your name on, yeah? And then the judges, before they'd seen those forms, went and judged those 8 plants and gave their version. And there was a senior judge there in case there was a tie or any arguments. He was the one with the baseball bat. And basically they judged those plants and came up with the top 4 and their reasonings behind that, and awarded the appropriate number of points. I'm not going into the way the points work because that's quite complicated. But yeah, and then they basically, you know, read out their results and who actually got them right. You know, so it's a nice little bit of fun. I quite enjoyed it. And guess who spotted the mealybug on one of the plants? And they'd taken it out of the competition table for the same reason as they put it in amongst those 8. It had some mealybugs on the back of some of the blooms. Well, in judging circumstances, that automatically disqualifies the plant. Bugs and critters on plants, automatic disqualification, even if they're dead. Yeah? Any signs of virus, automatic disqualification. And it's not only because it's just a no-no, it's what about everybody else's plants in close proximity? You know, you've got to consider everybody else. If you bring bugs into a confined space, you could get them on somebody else's plant who's never had a bug in their life. Is there such a person? Never had a bug? Well, maybe there's one out there somewhere. Anyway, so it was a good meeting. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I managed to get rid of my giant Vanda that I didn't want and the 2 young Vandas. So up here now we only have 3 large Vandas. They have room, they have the light, and I don't want any more. I'm happy with those 3. We've got the one that has the orange flowers on, not in bloom at the moment, the big blue that's out at the moment, and the one that has the very large white flowers with the deep purple lip. I'm happy to keep those 3 for now. I don't think I'd ever get rid of that one, and I certainly wouldn't get rid of the orange one. Maybe the white one, yeah. It's not the best of Vanda blooms, but anyway, we'll see. But it also now means this whole rack up here is empty. I've said many times, hanging space I have coming out of my ear holes. It's shelf space I'm short of, as you can see. It's shelf space I'm short of. Yeah, so a good meeting, good fun, some lovely homemade cake, and -3 Vandas. I didn't get as much money as I'd have liked for them, but that wasn't the point. The point was to free up the space and get rid of plants that I no longer want to keep. So somebody's gone away. I did a bit of bullying actually, because they were interested in the large Vanda. I printed off a picture of the blooms and all that sort of stuff to go with it and how much I wanted. And I got the chairperson to actually announce on the microphone, Roger's got some Vandas up there. This was after the break when nobody'd shown any interest. He says he's not taking them home, and if nobody takes them off his hands, he's going to throw them in the hedge out in the car park. So go and make him an offer. So anyway, somebody came up and showed some interest, and they wanted the large Vanda. They didn't want to pay as much as I was asking, but they were still offering a reasonable price, and I bullied them into taking the other 2 at the same time. So basically they had to take all 3 or none. Did a bit of bullying. Well, precious sales, should we call it. Wasn't really bullying at all. It's all light-hearted stuff. Anyway, so yeah, a good meeting, quite fun. And now today I really do have to get on with some serious watering. So I can't see anything else to film. I don't think I will find anything else anyway. So I'll end this one and get on with my watering. It's going to be a long day. I may not get finished and have to continue tomorrow, but I'm hoping literally to get the lot done today. And we'll see where we go from there. Bye for now. Thanks for dropping by.